And what's awesome about this homesteading thing is there's definitely more than one way to do it, and do it correctly and do it right. There is no one right way. Hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. We're in the goat barn today. I was gonna shoot one of those like weekly videos that I do where I show you something that I'm doing a little bit every day. I will restart those again soon, but something came up and I want to have this conversation. So here we are. This is kind of the new-ish milking setup. This is my new milking area, and I am kind of getting things situated how I like them. One of the things that I really wanted to change this year is I wanted to be able to milk not necessarily 2 does at once, though I can when I have my milking machine out, but I wanted to be able to allow, just for sake of time, one doe to finish eating her breakfast and getting all of the nutrition that she needs while I am working on the other one to help streamline the process and to make the milking chore faster. And I can milk more does because of that and feel like that I have more time, because I do. So we'll be bringing the does in here in just a second. And I have gotten some comments about this kind of situation. This is how I've been bringing the does in to be milked. They come in from there and walk around and come in here. And a couple people have said, Heather, why don't you bungee that door open? Well, eventually, once we're done kidding, I still have 2 more does to kid in a couple of weeks. This is going to be completely open to the does. So as you see them over here running around and loafing, that is how they're going to be here. And so they are just going to enter the milking area from this door all on their own. But because I've got it blocked off for kidding, that's why we're kind of having to walk a little bit, but it's okay. We should definitely peek at some babies before we get to milking. I know there's a bunch of them that lay down here. Yes, Breezy, we will get to you. We will. We're trying to look at your child. Is she down there somewhere? Also ignore the messy mineral feeder. I've got a good one hanging up over there, and I'm going to be putting a new mineral system in here. It might take me a couple months to get it set up, but that's coming. How's it going, everyone? Basking in the sun? Good job, Winnie, not stepping on anyone's children. I think Christine's been nursing someone's baby. See that? Christine is retired. She's 9 years old, and her last couple of kiddings were pretty hard on her. Really, her last kidding wasn't too bad, but the recovery was pretty hard, especially for the fact that she only had a single doeling. She shouldn't have had that much of a recovery issue, but it looks like she probably is nursing a baby, which is fine by me. I don't really care. But I wanted to start this conversation out by getting it out there that I don't mind comments like this. I think that questions like this and expressing concerns like this is very good. It's a lot better than just sitting there quiet and making assumptions or not asking questions, and so not being able to get someone's full perspective or learn that kind of thing. So I'm not over here trying to call anyone out, but I think that these are good questions, and I think that these are good concerns, and very likely there's probably more people that have these concerns than voice them. And so I figured I would make an entire video about why you see me kind of assisting frequently in the births that my goats have here on my farm, so that it can help clear things up and help make some people feel better who maybe want to get into goats and are a little bit freaked out, thinking that you have to help every single goat give birth. You do not. So one of the questions that I got recently was, or really was just a concern, it was someone that really was looking forward to getting goats, been thinking about getting goats for several years, but they've been watching my kidding videos, seeing that I'm helping every single doe give birth, and that really freaked them out and made them wonder if goats were right for them. Now, It is true that most of the time everything works out just fine and you do not need to help. It is true. Now what you see me doing most of the time is pretty superficial, and if you've got goats, you probably know. What I'm doing most of the time in birth is just making sure that things are optimal. So you'll see me making sure that the kid is coming out in the correct position. And then if the kid isn't quite in the right position, you'll see me fixing that for what I can from the outside, just superficially. One of the issues with waiting to figure out how the kid is presented, let's say a head comes out and all you have is a head and the doe is unable to deliver that, it is very, very hard, trust me, I know, to push that head back in to retrieve a leg and get the kid out in a more streamlined fashion. Now a nice wide doe can handle a head-only kid, and we have had does do just fine with that, but helping sooner rather than later is usually a good course of action, but you do not always have to help. So as an example, today I just posted the video where Tizzy and Fury gave birth. Both of those does very easily could have delivered without me being there at all, and they would have had healthy live kids at the end of it. Now with the goats that gave birth in the beginning of Kidding Palooza, they were all first-time moms, and sometimes first-time moms get kind of freaked out. They don't know what's going on, and sometimes they can be a little bit reluctant to push if they don't have their goat keeper companion down there, especially if they are bottle babies. They can just be kind of not quite dependent on people, but I'm not going to say that they're not dependent on people, especially for like emotional support. A lot of them really like to have their keepers near. But really, had I not been there, I do believe that those two births would have gone off without a hitch. But what I didn't know was, are these goats going to be good mothers? Are they going to allow their babies to nurse? I have had cases where I have been there with a goat delivering, and it was a first-time mom. It was Clover last year, and she was very, very rough with her kids. She was like trying to bury them. I don't know what was going on with her, but it makes me more comfortable to be there just in case of situations like that, just in case the baby needs help latching, something like that. It's just a comfort thing for me, but it's not required. Also, with first fresheners, we have kind of a thing here with some of our babies being quite large, and goats that are out of what I call my Havoc line, which Havoc was a goat that I had here for a really long time. I kept back a lot of his daughters, and a lot of his kids have been born here. He tended to throw very large babies. And so with his daughters as first timers, I don't know, or I didn't know, if that was going to be the case for them and if they would require a little bit of assistance. And again, I say require loosely, because even with Tizzy, where, you know, she had a baby with its elbow locked a little bit, Tizzy, if I wasn't awake at the time, very well could have worked, I mean, decently hard to get that elbow locked baby out. She would have probably gotten it out. She would have probably been fine, but because I was there and I knew what the hang up was, I felt more comfortable helping. So I know, just from past experience and watching other births and from reading a couple different books that I have on goat birth, that if the goat is a little bit more streamlined, so if you kind of pull those front hooves forward a little bit, the elbows are no longer locked behind the pelvis, and it just makes things faster and easier on the doe. She gets a lot less exhausted, and there's a lot less stress on the kids. So knowing that means that I'm a lot more likely to help in those situations, but again, it's not necessarily required. Oftentimes it does work out just fine. Come here, sweet girl. Sorry. Girl. I definitely don't want to be that person though that sets you up wrong. I forgot, I usually hobble her. It's not that Tori is a kicker, It's that she likes to lift her leg in kindness. She wants me to get good access. She does the same thing when her baby nurses. It's very cute, but she tends to hook her foot over this bar here or accidentally put her foot in the bucket. So I have these little hobbles. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I don't want to set anybody up wrong in thinking that if you don't attend any of your goat births, that everything is going to work out okay 100% of the time. Things absolutely do go wrong in goat births, and unfortunately I have had some bad experiences that I have under my belt now that do shape the way that I do things. So you can start out doing something one way, and sometimes things go wrong and it makes you pivot, and that's completely fine. It is really good to make a plan and to have a dream of exactly the way you want things to work out, but it takes flexibility, this whole thing does, and it takes a certain level of maturity to see when things are going wrong, try to assess why they're going wrong, and make some pivots to your original plan just to suit the needs of the time. You can always go back to the original plan once you have a little bit more experience, once you have a little bit more confidence, but it's fine to kind of ease into your ideal. I'm definitely not at my ideal. I'm definitely not doing exactly what I had dreamed that I would have been doing from the very start. I really wanted to do things as holistically as possible. The fact is, my land is severely lacking in nutrients. We live on an old tobacco farm plot, and all around us is big agriculture, and so all around us, probably even where our hay is grown, there is a serious lack of nutrition in our forage. I have to keep that in the forefront when anything goes wrong with my goats, that it could very well be mineral related or nutrition related or something like that. So for an example, goats need a heavy amount of copper to really keep on top of the worm load, as well as sufficient amounts of proteins and other things. I have 6 acres of pasture that gets full sun all the time. It grows very well. I don't actually know the quality of that feed, and so I can look at my goats and see what their needs are as far as, you know, their hair coats and their conditioning and things, and make adjustments based on that. But the ideal thing that I would do is just put the goats out on pasture and never need to do any kind of deworming or anything, but we're just not there. So I don't have the ideal setup, and so that means that I'm not going to be able to have my ideal quite yet. It's not that we'll never get there, it takes work. I don't think anyone is going to just start homesteading on the perfect amount of land that has the perfect amount of minerals, the perfect workable soil, the perfect amount of sunlight all the time, the perfect weather. There are things that come your way, and being able to adjust your expectations to kind of suit where your farm and where the needs of your farm are in that moment, it's good. So close. This way. Good girl. This doe here is named Shindy. And if you followed Kidding Palooza this last week, you know that Shindy had the toughest birth of them all. Shindy was trying to prolapse, and because of that, she just wasn't dilating right. It was a whole thing. I will link the video below if you missed it, but really, when we encountered this issue with Shindy, it did have me wondering what to do with her, because I've never experienced anything like that before. The potential for prolapse or the false ringworm. And I did wonder, could this be something that could be passed down? A couple people in the comment section said yes, that sometimes that kind of propensity to have a prolapse can be genetic. And a lot of people will just cull a doe in order to not have that happen again and not keep daughters out of her. Now, that can be the case. I'm not denying that. However, I did some research and learned that sometimes these issues of like improper dilation and really anything having to do with the uterus kind of not acting as it should could be calcium related. And Shindy does come out of a line that does tend to put a lot into their milk. I try my best to support my does as well as they can during their pregnancies, in the lead up to birth and after birth, but it doesn't mean that I'm always going to get it right. And so if calcium could have been her problem, that's not Shindy's fault. And I don't really want to fault her for that. I'm responsible for her fully. Shindy was born here. Shindy's nutrition has been totally my responsibility, and that is not lost on me. I am not an expert. I know that I am dealing with less than ideal conditions here on my farm, and I'm not ready to cull Shindy. Now, cull doesn't have to mean to the freezer. I could just not breed her, sell her to a pet home or whatever, but I'm not ready to blame her for like her issues, because I'm directly responsible for the way that she turns out if it's not something genetic. And I would like to give her the benefit of the doubt that maybe it is my fault. Maybe I do need to address some things nutritionally for her in order to best support her. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't think about when they talk about kind of problem animals on their farm. It sounds like the ideal thing to have an entire herd of animals that completely sustain themselves off of the land, and you don't have to lift a finger to help them ever. I think that that is something that can be achieved, but it is, I mean, that is years in the making, and we've only been keeping goats for 5 years, and I will continue to try to improve. I'm just not there yet. And I'm not like arrogant enough to think that her issues aren't a reflection on my management. And I'm not about to punish her for something that I may have done. What I am going to do is reevaluate my program, figure out what things that I can control with the issues that she had, make adjustments for that. And if we see this again in the future, then I'll know more. I will have tried my best with her, and then we can address that then. But for now, I'm going to assume it's me and not her. Wrong one. We're gonna go up here. Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. Go the whole way. There you go. They do make a ramp for these stands. I might have to get it. I can't really speak for other producers, but I feel an immense amount of responsibility for my does. A lot of them were born and bred here. As I mentioned, a lot of them are built on the nutritional support that I've given them, and I have made the choice to keep them and breed them to a specific buck. I've chosen the buck to breed them to, and so I feel a lot of responsibility to them. If I've asked them to breed for me, to make babies for me, and to make milk for me, I owe it to them to give them as much support as I can before, during, and after birth. And again, I'm not trying to shame anybody who does not feel the same way. I'm just trying to give you guys my perspective on how I feel and why I might be a little bit more present and active during the kidding process than maybe you've seen on other channels. This does not mean that my level of involvement is the correct way. It's just the way that I choose to do things. And what's awesome about this homesteading thing is there's definitely more than one way to do it, and do it correctly and do it right. There is no one right way. I think ideal is subjective. Ideal is whatever works for you, whatever gives you the joy, whatever gives you the satisfaction, whatever gives you the culmination of whatever you set out to do this for in the first place. If you can achieve that, it doesn't necessarily matter how you got there. It's still good. A lot of people are probably wondering how long this is taking me. My camera has been running for 38 minutes, and I have been stopping and talking to it. The girls that I'm milking right now, the first 3 don't have babies on them. They kidded in the fall time, and so I only milk once a day, so they're not really at their full capacity or their full potential. When you do once a day milking, you don't get as much milk as you would if you did twice a day milking, but I just can't swing that. That's too much for me. And so they're not milking a ton, and these girls are not giving a ton because they're feeding their babies babies. So it's going a lot faster than it would if I had some full udders, but I've got almost a gallon of milk at this point. And I'm getting my hands on my does. I really like to get my hands on my does as frequently as I can, at least once a day, just to make sure that everything is going well after birth, because the care of the animals, or the care of the does and kids, doesn't just stop on birthday. You really have to be keeping good eyes on the does and the kids, especially in the first couple weeks after birth, to make sure everything is going okay. And for one of my does, she's okay, it's okay. But we had an incident that I wasn't sure that I really wanted to share, but I'm going to, because it's one of those things where if seeing the births and things that can go wrong kind of makes you nervous about keeping goats, hearing about some of the things that can genuinely happen is probably good. It's fine if you hear all these things and it freaks you out and you decide you don't want to keep goats. I think that that's better than getting a whole bunch of goats and thinking that it's going to be this easy, beautiful thing, and then something happens and you think that you're a failure because you haven't heard someone talk about it, or you haven't seen people do this thing before. Because as they say, and a lot of you have probably heard this before, where there is livestock, there is dead stock. And that's absolutely true. We have lost babies every single year for one reason or another, and we've already lost one this year. Come here, sweet girl. This here is Elpis, and she likes to tuck her butt. I don't like milking Elpis for a few reasons, so I was just gonna have her raise her kids for me. And she still has one baby, but I was editing a video the other day. I was in my house, and I do have a camera in my barn, so it overlooks really wherever I want it to overlook. And yesterday I had the camera pointed in the main barn area, and I turned it on after I got done editing a video, and I saw a kid floating in the water trough. So, as I've mentioned in past videos, goats love to find creative ways to die. You have to look around your space and figure out, how can a kid get stuck? You've probably seen the babies that are in that hay feeder. I hate it. I have to figure out how to get them to not get in it. I might genuinely have Levi just take that whole hay feeder out, because we have had goats get stuck in hay feeders and break their legs before. But when we set up the water trough, it made me nervous from the get-go. I like to have that much water out because I have a lot of goats. Goats need a lot of water to produce milk. Can you see that I'm having to do a lot of udder massage and then squeezing of the teat and a lot of udder massage? This is why I don't like milking her. She just doesn't let her milk down very readily, but because we lost her buckling, she's only got the one doling on her, and the doling prefers this side, and I don't want anything to happen to Elpis, her udder, or for her health, like with mastitis or something. So I'm doing what I can. I'm not going to milk this side out fully, because all I really want to do is just take her capacity down to whatever that little doe can keep up with, and then that'll be fine. I don't need to milk Elpis. But when I set up troughs initially, I was thinking, okay, if a kid happens to get in here, because kids are very bouncy, I don't think it necessarily matters that the trough that I have is quite low. It's actually buried halfway in the pack. It's an 18-inch high trough, and I keep it as full as I can. But, you know, especially with little Nigerian babies, I did foresee this happening, so I wasn't necessarily surprised when I saw that it happened, because I knew that the potential was there. But I had tried to put like a fail-safe in place. I did have a cinder block in there. The cinder block served two purposes. It held the hose in place for me, so I could just open up the spigot and fill it, but also it provided a step, so if a kid got in there, it could get out. But he couldn't. And this baby was only 2 days old, and I think that that probably contributed. He just still hadn't really found his land legs yet, and yesterday was very, very cold, so I don't know how long he was in there. He might have had his head above water and then just got hypothermia and died. I couldn't bring him back. We did put more than one cinder block in the water trough now. Now there's 4, and so essentially we've just raised the bottom of our water trough, so there's only about 4 inches of water, and that should be plenty for a kid, if it happens to fall in again, to get footing it and get back out. The silver lining, if you can call it one, was that this wasn't necessarily a keeper animal. All life is precious, and his purpose really was to go in my freezer. But with our freezer animals, we really take care to make sure that their life is of quality, and at the end of their life is quick and painless. And the fact that he didn't get to have either one of those things, it really does bother me. I'm also not going to let her eat a whole ton because I don't want her body going into overproduction with a lot of nutrition. So she's gotten plenty to feed this little doe. I'm going to pull her off now. Come on. I know. Come on. Here we have lovely Miss Elsa. Elsa is currently nursing triplets, but they're not quite keeping up with her potential. They're still really little. They're only 3 days old at this point, and so I'm just gonna help them out a little. I'm not gonna drain her fully, but I do want her capacity to stay up. She's one of my highest capacity milkers, if not my largest capacity milker. Last year when I got her, she was milking 12 pounds a day, which is awesome. Milk is often referred to in pounds of milk. A lot of people in the show world can conceptualize pounds of milk. I kind of couldn't for a while, but one of my friends, Mary, told me that a pint is a pound. So if you can picture 12 pints coming out of a goat every single day. That was Elsa in her peak last year when she had twin bucklings. This year she had 3. She had 2 bucks and a doe. So I expect her capacity to be quite high in her peak this year. They usually peak around 6 to 8 weeks after they've had their babies, and a good doe will keep up her production for quite a while. Just trying to even her out a little bit, and then I'll leave plenty for babies. So it was really sad to have lost that buckling, but also I wasn't super surprised. I knew that that was a possibility going into it, and I think that that's a healthy mindset. You don't necessarily want to obsess about the things that can go wrong, because that will stop you from doing anything, really. Like, this is very hard. There's a lot of hard things kind of endlessly. Like I said, we lose kids every single year, and sometimes we lose adults that we love. It was December of 2023, we lost a beloved goat named Calamity. And a lot of me knows that that is not the first precious adult goat that I am going to lose. And so, does that make me not want to keep goats? Absolutely not, because the good outweighs the bad, even though the bad sometimes sticks out more on platforms like this, and bad stuff does hurt. It does. It can take you down for a little while, and I don't want to make it sound like it's not a big deal, because it is, but the joy of keeping goats far outweighs the bad, and it is all worth it.